Okay, welcome everybody to Freetrail Friday. My name is Dylan Bowman, joined by my good friend, Mr. Eric Senseman. This is his second appearance on the program. Eric, how's it going, bro?
Hey, doing good, Debo. Thanks for having me back.
Always great to have you. The first time we did this was the first Freetrail Friday, and we've been going now for like 2.5 months. The last time we talked was right before the Black Canyon 100K, where there were 6 golden tickets distributed. And here we are again before the Canyons 100K, where there are another 6 golden tickets to be distributed. We will be breaking down the course, the contenders, the conditions that these athletes will be confronting out there in between the Auburn and Forest Hill area, a place that is near and dear to every trail runner's hearts. And it's going to be a wild weekend. The field is extraordinarily deep, and I wouldn't rather break it down with anybody else. Mr. Senseman, it's so good to have you here. Before we get to it, again, as always, a big thank you to our presenting sponsor of all of our Freetrail Friday programming, that being Aura. Guys, you have to go get an Aura ring. Trust me, this thing is the best. Senseman, I'm not sure if you've ever used one before, but if you haven't, there's a link in the description in YouTube you should take advantage of here after the show. My wife, Harmony, had a 96 readiness score the other day. Absolutely mind-blowing statistics. Her sleep prowess is something to behold. My stats are not nearly as impressive, but it's a fun thing to check in on every morning. It's fun to have sort of the friendly competition and rivalry with your significant other. So use the link in the description here in YouTube or in the show notes if you listen to this in podcast form, where you can take advantage of 6 months free subscription with the purchase of a new Gen 3 Aura ring. Big thank you to Aura. Eric Senseman is back on the show. Just before going live here, he was submitting his fantasy Freetrail picks for the race this weekend. So just a reminder here on the top end of the show, this is our inaugural week of fantasy trail running. We did a little demonstration last week on the show of how to actually use the service. But if you didn't tune in last week, please do navigate to fantasy.freetrail.com, where we are starting fantasy trail running. It's very easy. Submit your top 5 picks for both men and women in the Canyons 100K and in the Madeira Island Ultra Trail, which is happening this evening. Madeira starts at 4 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. So that's in about 4 hours, at which point the picks will be closed. Canyons starts at 5 a.m. tomorrow Pacific time, at which point picks will be closed. So you have just a few more hours for both races to get those picks in, including yourself, Mr. Senseman. So I appreciate everybody playing with us. This is going to be really fun. And again, there are giveaways on the line. We've got some great Freetrail swag, sort of maybe similar to the t-shirt that I'm wearing or the hoodies that you guys have probably seen all over the social media, and a Rumple blanket. So come play with us. It's going to be super duper fun. That being said, long intro, Eric Senseman. Great to have you here, bro. I think before we get to breaking down the action this weekend, I want to hear first about your preparation for the Cocodona 250, which is coming up in like 2 weeks. Are you overwhelmed with excitement or fear at this point?
You know, Debo, I try not to think about it. It's a skill that I developed when I first started running ultras, which is just not to ever consciously consider what you're about to do. But I'm feeling pretty good. I did have an ankle roll in the canyon a week ago that was pretty gnarly. So I was seeing my PT this morning. It's still a little swollen, but it's going to be fine.
It's going to be fine. I guess so, man. I mean, are you intimidated by it? 250 miles. This is a postgraduate level exam for you.
Totally.
Right now.
Yeah. You know what I've tried to do? I don't know if you've thought of it this way, like training for something like hard rock, where you're going to be out for 20, 24 hours. But I've sort of just tried to conceptualize it not so much as mileage, but as getting from one place to another. And the course is structured such that that's pretty natural because you're going from like town to town. Yeah. So I've run a few different sections on the course, and yeah, I just try to think about it that way. Like, I'm just going to go out and like eat some food and enjoy being outside and just get from this town to the next. And once I get there, I'll deal with the next part.
Wild. I mean, maybe afterwards we can record another podcast and get the blow by blow, because I'm fascinated by not only the challenge of it, but the logistics of it. And, you know, whoever's going to be crewing for you is probably deserving of a Nobel Peace Prize. But cool stuff. And we do actually have Fantasy Freetrail activated for Cocodona too. So it'll be fun for people to play and follow along with that. And I'm sure Jamil has their live stream all figured out for all whatever 5 days or however long that thing's going to take.
I think this year they're going to turn it off at night, which seems fair. Everyone should get some sleep.
Yeah. Totally. Cool, man. Well, back to the subject at hand. This race this weekend is going to be wild. I don't think either of us have ever raced canyons. Have you done the race?
I have not.
Okay. So neither of us have actually run canyons, but we've both done Western states multiple times. So we are quite familiar with the terrain and with the characters that are in the field. So it's going to be fun to break it down together. I figure we start the conversation by just talking about the course. And I do also just want to emphasize, because I forgot to say it on the front end, that the chat feature, as always, is activated here on YouTube. So if you guys have people you're rooting for this weekend or things you want to throw into the conversation, please just post them in the chat on YouTube, and I'll do my best to pull some of that stuff out. But I'm going to share my screen here, Senseman, and then we can talk a little bit about the course to get everybody familiar with what these athletes are going to confront this weekend. So we see it here. This is Anthony Costales' winning victorious Strava from 2021, last year's race. And Senseman, I'll kick things over to you for just like a quick overall synopsis of this terrain and what the athletes are in for.
Yeah, well, as you know, Debo, they call it California carpet, which is maybe a little bit too generous because there are some sections that are a little bit more technical, but it's fairly a non-technical trail. So definitely allows for quick turnover, people that are fast, strong to do well, because you don't have to worry about that skill set. Unlike Black Canyon, right, which we broke down a couple months ago, where it's more a little bit more picky and requires a different skill set. So here, the tough thing about this course, man, you got so much climbing in the second half. If you've looked at any of the interviews on I Run Far, who will be out there doing live coverage on Saturday, it's been talked about, but you really can't overstate it. I think what you need on a course like this is just a ton of strength, because those last 20 miles will be a real heartbreaker for a lot of people, I think. And as such, I think it'll be an exciting race in the second half, because I think there's a good chance, a lot of men and women will be running together through the first half, because it's more runnable and you don't have these long climbs for the big separation.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I think this is a strength runners race. And you mentioned that the California carpet is sort of what these trails are known for, meaning it's not a hyper technical course. It's a course that usually would favor somebody with a really fast marathon PR. And especially if you flipped the course the opposite direction and ran the same direction that Western States does, that being downhill, it would favor a different athlete, I think, that this course does, because it is a net uphill course. It favors that type of athlete who is fast, who does have speed, but as you mentioned, importantly, has the strength to climb late in the race. So I'm just going to sort of zoom out here on this Strava map just to give people an appreciation of where we are in the world. Of course, everybody's probably familiar just by virtue of the fact that this course does share much of the same trails as the legendary Western States 100, starting in downtown Auburn. And then effectively you do run sort of backwards on the Western States course. If I zoom in here, we'll see sort of the legendary Cal Street area of the Western States course that comes just after the 100K mark every year in that obviously notorious and amazing race. Coming into Forest Hill, the biggest aid station on the Western States course. I assume it's probably similar at the Canyons race, though I've never been there, but runners do go through Forest Hill and then down into Volcano Canyon here, and then up and over to Michigan Bluff, of course, another landmark in our sport, before diving into the infamous El Dorado Canyon here, climbing up. And then it looks like they do sort of a little jog loop out here in order to just make up some of the mileage before going off the Western States course back into El Dorado Canyon a little further east, and then climbing up to this China Wall finish line up on Forest Hill Road. This is actually a pretty remote area in between Forest Hill and Robinson Flat for anybody who's ever trained on the Western States course. You probably remember driving past this big parking lot, which I think is the staging area for their finish line. I've slept in that parking lot a couple of times in the course of my years training for Western States, but it's a nice little staging area. But one thing that I just wanted to flag on this course that I think is really important to remember, and just like looking at Anthony Costales' Strava here, you effectively finish with a 90-minute climb. You know, this is an absolute heartbreaking way to finish an ultramarathon, right? And it's a place where if you've miscalculated your effort in these first 25 miles or so, which look to be crazy fast, really the first 50K looks to be crazy fast, then you could really start to lose time with people who have executed more intelligently or created a better, sort of more moderate effort for themselves in those early parts of the race. Senseman, anything else to add about the course that you think is worth mentioning here to our live viewers?
No, I think that's a good overview. I mean, maybe the last thing is just that I feel like we can say this almost about every race, but something about this course profile brings it to the forefront. But I just think experience would go a long way on this type of course, because, man, to be 53 miles deep, staring down a 2,500 foot climb, there's something about having suffered in the past that can help you get through that, because a lot of that is mental, you know, being able to continue to move, to not walk, to run that last climb, even slowly.
Because it is runnable. It is runnable.
Yeah.
I was just scrolling down here on Costales' Strava here, and it looks like he was doing 10s, 11s, and then low 8s, you know, to finish things off. So it is still runnable. And clearly he was moving quickly so late in the race, but still with that constant uphill gradient for the last 90 minutes, that's a really tough way to finish. And it's a great way for somebody to make up big time on a suffering person in front of them, for sure. So
absolutely.
Just to kind of recap the statistics here, as you see from Anthony's GPS device, whatever it was, looks like a Coros. It was just about 62 miles even, 14,000 feet of climbing. His total time was around 9:11. So that's probably what we would expect to see the winners coming into this weekend, though Senseman and I are going to talk about why it could be faster, and we'll go into that right now. So Senseman, let's talk about the conditions this weekend. I've got the weather here pulled up, but maybe give us a quick intro to what your top line reactions are to what these athletes are going to confront from an environmental perspective.
Yeah, again, if you look at some of the pre-race interviews out there, everyone's just marveling at how cool it is. You know, like Auburn, California, you think of Auburn, you think of a furnace, just because most people are there in late June. So really cool temperatures. I mean, it looks like upper 30s, low 40s at the start in Auburn, and it looks like on course it shouldn't get above 60. I mean, those are 40 to 60. Those are ideal temperatures, right, for running quickly. I suppose the wild card is going to be that there's been rain and even snow at the higher elevations on course. I think the question becomes, that's supposed to taper off today. Maybe it already has, but over the next 24 hours, how does that water drain? Does it get super muddy? Is it slick? But being a California guy, Debo, you probably have some intel on that.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I think most of the athletes are probably breathing a sigh of relief when they see this weather forecast. To me, this seems like fast conditions. Anna Mae Flynn, who's one of the top contenders in the women's race this weekend, posted a photo from the finish line area at China Wall, and it looked like there was 2 inches of snow in the parking lot there. I would guess that will melt by the time the athletes arrive there tomorrow afternoon, but you'll see here a high of 64, a low of 46 for the race tomorrow. That is screaming fast running conditions, especially if you contrast that against what it could be and what it usually is at Western States, especially. But I don't recall exactly what the weather conditions were at Canyons last year, but I doubt they were this comfortable in terms of overall heat level. And with the level of athlete in the race today, that can be massively conducive to dramatic racing because there's going to be less opportunity for people to overheat, to explode. And so I think what it'll do is actually keep the packs closer together later on in the race. To your point, one of the, I think, key variables will be how slippery is that last climb, right? Because if it did snow quite a lot, if there was a lot of precipitation on the trails there, of course, California has been in a super drought. And so if the trails got very wet, they could turn into quite muddy, slippery messes out there. So I guess that'll be to be determined, to be seen on race day. But overall, I think the athletes would prefer a little mud to the alternative, which would be super hard, cracked earth with 90-degree sunshine beating down on top of you. So weather conditions are, I think, very conducive to speed. And look at it all week there in the Forest Hill area. It's a moderate start to the late spring, summer season there. So maybe this portends good conditions for Western states, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. So anyway, there was some commentary in the chat wondering if I was looking at the right course for the Canyons 100K. I did sort of cross-check it with the GPS file that they provided on their website. I uploaded it into the Strava route builder. Looked to be identical to me, to the course that Anthony Costales ran on last year. And his Strava looked easier to understand from a display perspective for our live audience. So I do think that is the right course.
Yeah, and perhaps the discrepancy, Dylan, they do on the website, although slightly difficult in terms of being user friendly, but that's okay. In terms of what I did find, they do advertise it as 59.3 miles, which is not what you see on the Strava profile last year from Anthony, which shows a full 62. So I don't know if there have been any alterations to the course, or if there's just a discrepancy between what they're advertising and what you get on a GPS watch.
Yeah, I agree. The Canyons 100K website could use a makeover, but the race directors have a lot on their plates, and maybe with this new UTMB acquisition, they'll put some effort into that digital front. But yeah, either way, the course, if it is different from last year's course, it's a moderate change. It's not something that would be significant or that would lead to, athletes running significantly faster or slower times.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
it brings up something that maybe is interesting for us to riff on quickly before we start going into the fields, and that is the fact that this is the first by UTMB event to take place on North American soil. It's the second race on the UTMB World Series. The Ultra Trail Istria, the 100 miles of Istria, happened 2 weekends ago in Croatia, and I think that was the season opener because the Tarawera 100K and the Tarawera event in New Zealand was canceled again in February. So this is the second installment of the UTMB World Series, which is going to be interesting to see. I think just how UTMB and Ironman come together to sort of brand this event. And we'll see if it impacts sort of the feeling and the vibe at all around the race. Senseman, do you have anything you want to sort of say on that subject?
Well, first, am I right in remembering that you ran that race in Croatia years ago?
I did. Yeah, it's an awesome race. It's an awesome race. Yeah.
Was it one of the first editions? It seems like it was a few years ago.
It was on the Ultra Trail World Tour.
Right.
So yeah, I went and ran it when it was on the Ultra Trail World Tour. Now it's part of the UTMB World Series. And I ran the 100-mile race, but as UTMB is doing now, and we should go into this, they have lots of different distance distributions for all these races, right? So at Istria, I think it goes from 100-mile down to like a marathon distance race. And then also this, I think it was announced this morning, the Canyons has announced a 100-mile event for 2023 during this event. So they'll have, I think, the 25K at Canyons all the way up to 100 miles. Next year, we also saw this week, UTMB announced that they've got a new distance, I think a 15K race during the UTMB Mont Blanc event, of course, the flagship event, which happens every year in August in Chamonix. So it's going to be interesting. And this is the first North American event as part of the UTMB World Series. The other is Speed Goat happening in July. And then, of course, there's the UTMB Puerto Vallarta in October. So those are sort of the three in our neck of the woods. And this is the first one on the calendar.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. I mean, from the perspective of bringing people into the sport, I think offering those various distances is a good way to do that, because you can get people, hooked without having to run a 100-miler, right? Which, should be more accessible in that way. Obviously, from a business perspective, just adding the distances is super easy, because like you have your fixed costs. If you can add a few more races, it doesn't cost you much more. So I can totally see why they do it. And yeah, again, I think all around it's good.
Yeah, no doubt. I have to admit, I felt it was a little weird to add another 100-mile race that shares much of the Western States 100 course, but
Right.
I guess we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think with this new World Series architecture, obviously it seems that you're going to have to do a by UTMB or UTMB World Series event in order to get into the UTMB Mont Blanc. And so maybe it's an effort by UTMB to give American athletes more opportunities to earn those running stones and get into UTMB Mont Blanc, in which case I'm all for it. There, Ryan Miller sent me the mandatory kit that is going to be required for the athletes to carry this weekend. So in UTMB fashion, there is required kit. I'm just going to tick through some of it here just so our viewing audience is on board. But again, this is probably an effort by UTMB to standardize some of the equipment that people are using for safety purposes. And I think with the weather that came through California, and with some of the tragedies we saw in the sport of trail running last year, I think they're just using an abundance of caution. But of course, like you would expect, you're mandated to carry fluids, a pack, a headlamp, a lightweight jacket, a beanie or buff, a second insulation top layer, lightweight pants, gloves, and a space blanket. So a little overboard if you ask me, but I mean, better safe than sorry. But it's going to be interesting because the top athletes in this race for sure would have carried a lot less than that. And now they're going to be all wearing backpacks tomorrow. So
yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I guess you can't be too cautious, but it seems a little over the top.
yeah. Anyway, it's just good. I mean, it's going to be fun to see how this new series architecture comes together, and this is the first one in North America. It's the second one overall. And these guys are going to learn it in real time, and so they'll be, I'm sure, taking feedback from people who are there experiencing the races. And if they're smart, they'll take that feedback and they'll iterate on it and they'll listen to their customers, as any good business will. So moving on to the fields, let's get into it. This is going to be amazing. We'll start with the women, but before we go into it, I just want to flag a few notable scratches, especially for our fantasy Freetrail players this weekend. Jason Schlarb, Zach Miller, Katie Asmith, Florian Neuschwander, Marianne Hogan, Katie Arnold, and Pam Smith are all not going to be taking part in the 100K this weekend. So if you have made your picks, we have updated the website. I had Marianne Hogan on my list, so I had to redo my picks. So again, the voting closes tomorrow at 5 a.m. So make sure if you picked any of those names I just mentioned, you go back in there and amend your predictions for this weekend. Senseman, let's start with the women. Who are you looking at in terms of the favorites?
Well, it was 2021, I guess it was last year, when Brittany Peterson won Black Canyon. And of course, we talked about her, that race in our preview 2 months ago. She is in canyons. She's very, very good. Setting all things equal, I think if you look at the field, she is the number one contender. However, she has two very important races this summer, both Western States and UTMB. So I don't think she's racing necessarily to win. I think she'll be more reserved. I think she'll definitely be on the podium, possibly a win. But I think if she does, it's not going to be by running off the front. It would be by passing people later if she's not already ahead of them. But Brittany Peterson is my goat on this one. But I think you might object. So what do you think, Devo?
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you need to hit submit picks on your fantasy team right now. But no, I mean, I picked Brittany Peterson second in my fantasy roster. FYI, full disclosure, I have a ton of respect for her. She's an incredible athlete. She's absolutely smashed Black Canyon last year, improved what she can do over this distance. I think she has that combination of speed and strength that we talked about at the beginning. She's been a second place finisher at Western States in a crazy fast time a couple of years ago. And then she was fourth at Western States last year in 2021. So she knows this course. She knows these trails like the back of her hand. Definitely Brittany Peterson is one of the contenders for the victory in my mind as well. I picked Ladia Albertson Junkins in my fantasy team. I just had her on my podcast this week, and I'm just so impressed with her as a person and with her attitude and her recent victory, her second win at the Chuckanut 50K in a crazy fast time. It was a course record time, though there's some controversy over it being a little bit of a different course, because we also saw Adam Peterman run a wildly fast time on the Chuckanut course, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. But Ladia is one of those sort of like athletes who's been on the scene for a few years now, but has always sort of flown under the radar, never really seek the spotlight or anything like that, but super, super strong and has a great head on her shoulders. And so I see her as sort of the favorite in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And she was 13th at that Trail World Championships, first American. That might not sound that impressive, but that is a crazy, crazy competitive race. And 13th, that tells you something about an athlete. What it tells me is she knows how to grind, and she knows how to compete. And those will both play, very well on a course like Canyons with this field.
No doubt. So other women on your radar?
Well, Anna Mae Flynn, certainly. As you alluded to earlier, I think absolutely has a chance at the podium. She's not as, I would say, doesn't have as much experience at this distance. She has tended to have her greatest successes so far at shorter distances, but no reason to think she can't excel on this course and at this distance. But yeah, been around a while, and I think she knows how to get it done in terms of racing.
Yeah, no doubt. Anna Mae, I think, also exemplifies that speed and strength combination. And she's the type of athlete who can do really well in mountainous races and in the faster, more runnable races. We've seen her win Speed Goat at least twice, I think. Yep. She's won Lake Sonoma. Obviously, those are two very different courses, Speed Goat being very steep and technical and mountainous, where Lake Sonoma is obviously that Cali carpet. And I think the Canyons 100K it's sort of an interesting mix between those two types of race courses. And to your point, I think her Achilles heel might be inexperience at this distance. I wonder if she's intentionally going into this to try and acquire a golden ticket. I don't know if she's ever done 100K. I'm pretty sure she's never done 100 mile. As you mentioned, she's great at 50K, 50 miles. So it's great to see Anna Mae in the field this weekend, sort of stepping up in distance. She lives in Salida, Colorado. So this is kind of a tough time of year to be fit for a 100K trail race, but I'm sure she was happy with the weather forecast. And when she posted that photograph from the China Wall finishing area with the snow, I'm sure she was feeling quite at home coming from Salida, Colorado. So Anna Mae, also definitely one of the contenders. Kat Bradley's in the field, former Western States champion, obviously a super, super strong athlete, though she sort of runs hot and cold. I definitely always root for Kat. I think she's an awesome runner. She's got a great personality, but her Achilles heel has been consistency, especially in these high level races. She's obviously got the talent to win, though. I think she's hopefully just, wanting to put a solid one up there. Any comments on Kat or the rest of the field?
Yeah, so I actually had the chance to speak with Kat for unrelated reasons to racing maybe a month ago. And she's actually been in Hawaii this whole winter and has been, it sounds like, running pretty consistently. So I think that bodes well for her. But I think part of the issue living in Colorado, like she had in the past, is getting through the winter healthy and in a good place with fitness. So I would think that being out in Hawaii was a benefit to her in terms of training. So definitely hopeful, always rooting for Kat as well. It's hard not to. But I was going to add there too, Debo, that even if we're right about who we've talked about so far in finishing on the podium or up there, as mentioned, Brittany Peterson is in Western States in virtue of her 4th place last year.
Yep.
So she, no golden tickets going to her. So it is likely to roll down those 3 tickets to 4th or possibly beyond, because I'm not sure how many of these women are looking for the golden ticket versus just a big race earlier in the year.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Yep. And I think Brittany Peterson is the only athlete in the women's contenders that we're talking about now who does have a ticket into Western States. So she did finish in the top 3. As you mentioned, that would roll down to 4th. I just want to flag one thing while we're on the subject of Anna May. Our good friend Corinne Malcolm is in the chat. Shout out to Corinne Malcolm. She's on Madeira Island getting ready to start her 115K journey in 3.5 hours. So what's up, Corinne? Good luck to you tonight. And she's just reminding me that Anna Mae Flynn had a golden ticket into Western States in 2016 and had to drop with injury partway through. Yep. So I'm sure Anna Mae is hungry to get back into the Western States field and avenge that.
And I believe that was at Lake Sonoma,
yes,
where she got that ticket. So advertises 50 miles. It's really about 48.2, but
who's counting?
Yeah, who's counting? That's right.
Awesome. So just a few more names in the women's race that I think are definitely worth mentioning. We had Leah Yingling from Salt Lake City at the Gorge Waterfalls 50K just a few weeks ago. She finished a very strong 2nd place behind Keely Henninger in the 50K race and was using that as a stepping stone towards Canyon. So Leah, really solid runner from the Salt Lake area, like I mentioned, in the 100K race. Tomorrow, we had Zach Marion on Freetrail Friday to break down the Gorge Waterfalls race, and he made the comment, being a Salt Lake resident himself and knowing Leah, that she's a very strong closer. So she could be the type of person who may be a little ways back or outside of the golden ticket conversation halfway through when the runners get to Forest Hill, but she might be the type of athlete who could run through the field and into those golden ticket spots later on in the race. We have Nicole Bitter from Arizona, multiple time Western States runner, and an awesome, very consistent athlete in the field. Abby Levine from Boulder is in the field. We've got Jasmine Lothar, who Ladia mentioned on my podcast was somebody to look out for, and I've since took a flyer on, knowing nothing about her, for my fantasy team this weekend. So shout out to Jasmine. I think she's from British Columbia. Any other names that we're sort of forgetting to mention here?
I do have one more quickly. I want to piggyback on Abby. She was 4th at the North Face 50 mile in its last edition, I guess, 2019. Yep. Similar in style, a lot of climbing in the second half, super runnable stuff in terms of, not being too technical or so steep you can't run. So definitely the skill sets to kind of crush. I was actually texting with Megan Hicks of I Run Far, who again will be out there providing live coverage. And we were talking a little bit about Abby, and she said, I kind of see her as a Claire Gallagher type, where she only has to run like 50, 60 miles a week to kind of stay healthy and stay fit, but can just go out and crush because she just is a talent. So you definitely think Abby has a shot at that top 5, top 3. Here's a name you probably haven't heard, but Charlotte Cox, she's out of Santa Barbara, had won every race she'd ever run, including 9 trails, which is 35 miles with a lot of vert. Until last month, she ran Chuckanut. Rough day for her, so she was outside the top 10, but I think if she has a good day, it is her first 100K. We could see her towards the front of the race.
Yeah, no, she's ranked number 1 in ultra sign up just because, like you said, she hadn't ever lost until Chuckanut, and that ultra sign up ranking system, sort of takes just your results into account, doesn't necessarily measure it against the level of competition, et cetera. But I think she's won the 9 Trails race in Santa Barbara, which is definitely a strength type course.
Yes.
So Charlotte Cox will be an interesting character. And maybe I mean, for sure, there's going to be somebody who we haven't mentioned that's sort of like the story of the race, who comes out of nowhere, that's sort of like their breakout performance. And, obviously we've only mentioned a handful of names here. Obviously you've mentioned I Run Far a couple of times. They have great previews that go into much more depth on the competition in the field this weekend. And there's definitely going to be some people who do have their breakout performances. I know there's another few names like Michelle Davis from South Africa is coming all the way over to run canyons. That gives you an idea that she's probably hoping to stay for a couple of months and get into Western States while she's here. And then, like Megan Morgan, an interesting young athlete from Boulder. I don't know much about her, but yeah, this is going to be wildly entertaining. And that's one of the things that I always look forward to in races like this. It's sort of like last time we talked, right? Nobody talked about True Heart Brown going into Black Canyon, right?
Or I was
Jeff
kicking myself after that.
Yeah, Jeff Colt or
or Jeff Colt, right?
Yeah, and similarly on the women's side in that race, I'm forgetting the name of the Dominica, who finished second behind Claire, but was out front the whole race. So, it's fun to do this prognostication and banter, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of surprises, and that's why this is so fun. Let's talk about the men. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, and speaking of surprises, again, it's worth drawing the parallels or noting the differences. A course like Canyons allows for a lot more mistakes and requires a lot more just ultra running strength, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. It is hard to surprise people because it's hard to run 15,000 feet of climbing over 60 miles and have people not know about you, right? Like, it's hard to do that well and no one sees it coming.
Yep.
So what sort of indications would lead you to believe someone would do well with 15,000 feet of climbing over 100K? If your name's Adam Peterman, that's a
no experience at 100 kilometers, but if your name is Adam Peterman.
That's right. So it's his first 100K. For those that weren't familiar with Adam, you probably got to know him last year or last month. He won Speed Goat 50K last summer. He won the JFK 50, and that was a course record, by the way. He won JFK in the second fastest time, faster than Hayden Hawks, just a bit slower than Jim Walmsley. He then won Chuckanut in what was the fastest time, with some caveats perhaps, but he ripped the course, if it was different or not.
Sick race, and he won by like a 10-minute margin over Anthony Costales. So
which is
wild fast.
And Anthony Costales won this race last year in a course record time. So in my mind, Adam Peterman is the man to beat, bar none.
No doubt. We're in agreement on that. I would echo everything you said. I would just add, he's like 26 years old. This kid is one of the best talents in the sport right now. He's still, I think, under the radar because his best performances have come at races that are important, but not like A-tier races like this. If we're being honest, Speed Goat doesn't get the same kind of attention. JFK doesn't get the same kind of attention that Western States Golden Ticket races do. Same with Chuckanut. But people like you and I know Adam Peterman and think the world of him. But I think, this race could be his big, huge international breakout opportunity to punch his ticket into Western States, which if he runs, he's probably the only person that rivals Jim in terms of pure talent to come to that course. And if the conditions are good, watch out, because he could be sort of the next Jim Walmsley type character in the sport.
In terms of the way the race progresses, here's something to look for, because this is kind of how it's gone for him in previous races. If he's built himself a little gap by Forest Hill, he's going to win the race, would be my guess. Because he's already talked about how he doesn't want to go out too aggressively, kind of wants to stay within himself. It's a new distance. So if with that approach, he's already kind of off the front a bit, you should expect, I think you should expect that to build in the second half when all the majority of the climbing comes. And I also want to add, being a talented and accomplished runner is great, but Adam Peterman is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet.
Sweetie pie.
Yeah,
Sweetie pie. Yeah.
super humble. And what I was going to add, Dylan, is I think part of the reason he hasn't gotten as much notoriety is he doesn't try to get it. You don't see him online talking about how great he is, or trying to get accolades from people. I mean, super nice guy, and it's great to see.
Yeah, I had him on the podcast probably 6 months ago or so. I think it was after JFK, and I felt the same way. And he's a very popular person in his running community there in Missoula, Montana. Our mutual friend Mike Foote was a teacher or a mentor, I guess, cross country coach for Adam Peterman when he was in high school. And of course, Mike Foote is one of the true gentlemen on the circuit too. So shout out to Adam Peterman. We're super excited to see him put on a show tomorrow. And if he punches his ticket to Western States, get your popcorn ready, if you know what I mean. All right.
That's right.
We've sung his praises enough. Who else are you looking at in the men's race?
Well, you got a couple Flagstaff boys in there. Jared Hazen and Tim Frericks. And I'll let you speak at greater length, Debo. I'm a little too close.
No, I want your inside perspective on the guys.
Well, I mean, a couple things to say, I guess. Number one, if you take those guys at their best, Adam Peterman's got his hands full. If you take a 2017 Tim Frericks who won TNF 50, not only won Debo, but you might remember beat the likes of Hayden Hawks and Zach Miller by 15
ran 6 hours
minutes.
flat on the TNF course,
which is nuts.
Silly.
If you take a Jared Hazen who ran 14:26 at Western States, you put those guys on this course, and I think there's fireworks. Now, are we going to see a 14:26 Jared Hazen or a TNF winning Tim Frericks? I'm not sure. But that's kind of what they bring to the field, right? Is that upper boundary. Having that said, I think both of them have trained quite well in the last few months. Just a week ago, I ran with Tim in the canyon, and he came out in 73 minutes, which isn't going to mean a lot to a lot of people, but just suffice it to say that's very, very fast on a 5,000-foot climb. And he's gotten a lot of time in the canyon, as has Jared. And if you look at that course profile, Debo, back that we showed earlier, being at the bottom of the canyon with a 5,000-foot climb ahead of you is about as close as you can get to simulating being 40 miles into a race and having 7,000 feet climbing.
Great point.
So good training grounds for those guys.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it reminds me of philosophy that's been espoused on my show a couple of times by the likes of Jimmy Elam and Tim Tollefson and others, that training on terrain that's harder than that which you were going to confront on race day is a great way to have it feel less difficult on race day. So 5,000-foot climb out of the canyon on tired legs for Tim Frericks is going to be easier, at least theoretically, than that 2,000-foot climb over the course of the last 8 or 9 miles that I just showed everybody on Anthony Costales' Strava from last year. So the Flagstaff boys, man, I would love to see both Jared and Tim punch their tickets back to Western States. I feel like both of them have struggled with consistency in the last couple of years. I know like Tim works in healthcare and therefore has been distracted during the last couple of years that have been probably fairly stressful for people like him on the front lines during the pandemic. I don't know much about how Jared's been training, but obviously he changed sponsors recently, kind of new beginnings. He was just out training with the Solomon team at their sort of little team training camp in Cabo Verde, out somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean.
Off the coast of Senegal.
Yeah. So do you know how Jared's feeling going into this race?
Well, I picked him up from the airport when he got back from the islands with the team, and I looked at him.
How tan was he?
He was pretty tan, Debo, but when I looked at him, I just thought, dude, you're hollowed out. Like, you look like 2019 Jared Hazen. And then he proceeded to tell me how they would run for 6 hours a day and eat nothing but rice and fish. And I said, well, yeah, you're going to lose some weight pretty quick doing that.
Well, yeah, I'm really excited to see how these guys perform this weekend. And like you said, if they show up on form,
Yeah,
Adam
yeah.
Peterman's got his hands full.
Yeah, I agree. So we talked about, yeah, there's three guys. Obviously, none of them have entry to Western States. So if they all have good races, yeah, I think those are pretty solid picks for the top three. But there's no guarantee. So if you're looking at kind of that next tier, or who could fill in if those guys don't have good races, I think you definitely got to like Ryan Miller. He's coming off a win at Gorge Waterfall 50K. He beat Tyler Green there.
It was
Who,
a great run.
yeah,
He was
yeah.
back 4, 5, 6 minutes with 10 miles to go and won by 2 minutes.
Wow.
Textbook execution, really
That's
solid.
great.
And he did a little bit of a training camp on the Canyons course before coming up here to Oregon. So he knows the course. He desperately wants to get back into Western States. He, of course, won Bandera a couple years ago and got his ticket to Western States, but dropped,
Yep.
fairly early after struggling through the high country at Western. So I know he's
Yeah,
hungry to get back in and
definitely.
represents his home state of Texas proudly. And I don't know, for me, I'd love to see people who are not from the Mountain West or the West Coast come
Totally.
out and perform well. So
Yeah.
shout out Ryan Miller. Hopefully he does well.
Yeah, and then yeah, I can list a couple guys, and let's see, maybe Debo, what your thoughts are. I like seeing Dave Sinclair on the list. This guy from Canada, Dave Stevens, who I actually don't know much about, but I like what I read, or some of the results I saw. Um, I like Rod Farvard. I don't know if you're
From
familiar with
Mammoth.
Rod.
Yep.
Yep. I
Yep.
think on a good day, he's got a chance at kind of cleaning up towards the podium. So those were a few guys that stuck out to me in terms of kind of being there
Yeah.
and being in contention.
Yeah. David Sinclair is one of those athletes who is just a massive talent. I feel like I think his history is in Nordic skiing, if I'm not mistaken.
I
And
believe
I
that's
think
right.
he's from New England or something. I think he lives in Truckee or Reno now, but talking to Darren Thomas about him, David Sinclair is definitely a great talent. He's performed well at a lot of the Golden Trail series type races, so shorter distance, more mountainous. He won Speed Goat. He's done well at Pikes Peak. He's done well at Broken Arrow. So I think this is his first step up to the 100K distance. He did break a very old course record at the Silver State 50 miler last spring. So David Sinclair is, I think, in my top five. I have to go back and look at my roster for fantasy this weekend. And then I think another character who a lot of people are going to be watching this weekend is Reed Coolset from Canada, an Olympian, I think like a 210 marathoner. I think, that was quite a number of years ago now, but obviously the talent that would be very dangerous in a trail race like this in normal circumstances. It'll be really interesting to see how Reed performs. And he already has, I think he got a sponsor spot.
That's what I was going to add. I mean, I think that kind of takes the interest out of it for me. I just don't think he'll race aggressively at all. But we'll see.
Yeah. And then the Dave Stevens name that you mentioned, he won Run Rabbit 100 last fall and took home 12 grand in the process. I think that was his sort of breakout performance. I think he was at Black Canyon, I want to say, but maybe dropped out.
Okay.
Dave Stevens. I might be wrong about that.
There'd be too many to remember.
And then Sage Canada is back, dude. This is his type of course too.
It is. So that's where I was going to move next. You have a kind of the experience category because you also have Mark Hammond.
Yeah.
Now Mark Hammond was top 5 at Western States, I believe 3 years in a row before he dropped last year. So Mark and Sage, different skill sets, but I think they both play on this course and experience goes a long way. What do you see if the stars align for Sage? How do you think that looks in terms of his race?
I think Sage epitomizes the speed and strength situation. He's super talented. He's got so many great results. He's won TNF 50. He's won Lake Sonoma. He's good at the long courses and the short courses. I think he probably wants to get back into Western States. He had the shittiest year ever last year, having some very serious health problems, having his apartment home burned down in Boulder. some other issues. I can't remember off the top of my head. So, and I think he's sort of making a little film project of sort of making his comeback. So Sage Canaday, I think will have a lot of motivation out there this weekend. And, if he's in the same type of form that he has been traditionally in his career, he's absolutely a threat to win or at least secure one of those golden tickets.
No question.
Yeah. One name that I have to mention because I've received like 1,000 Instagram messages about this guy, Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones.
Kiwi. He's from New Zealand. I think he's like a 2:14 marathoner, and apparently he's just been a dominant force down under.
He won what was it, the Kepler Challenge 60K? Was that
I mean, the thing is, I don't know much about him. I wouldn't be able to pick him out of a photo lineup, but I like, without exaggerating, received 36 messages from Kiwis saying, watch out for Daniel Jones.
Dude, I love that.
He was going to try and get his ticket at Tarawera in February, but the race got canceled. So he booked his ticket to the US for the Canyons 100K. From what I've heard, he was inspired by fellow Kiwi Ruth Croft, who of course is champion, world-class athlete on the circuit, second place finisher at Western States last year. I think when he saw her results, he wanted to throw his hat in the ring. So Daniel Jones, I mean, we're up there with Reed Coolset and Adam Peterman in terms of just like pure talent.
Yeah.
Let's see how he does in this type of competition on these trails where he's a little less familiar,
right,
and, where he probably doesn't have as much 100K experience. I would love to see him, race off the front. I think it would be entertaining, but I don't think it would set him up well for success. I think he would be well served to, sort of tuck in there with the Tim Frericks and Jared Hazen train and not necessarily like try and run super aggressively to win, but instead play it tactically. And
if he, is looking to emulate Ruth Croft and her success, I mean, you've seen her do that a lot. I mean, States last year, she finished second, but she was, I don't know, middle of the top 10 or back of the top 10 in the first half.
Yep.
And then she just mowed people down.
Yeah.
So yeah, if he can be like Ruth Croft, he'll get a golden ticket.
Yep. So any other names you want to mention? Again, iRun Far's got a much deeper preview if you want to read through every single name. I think that's fair to call that the sort of contenders for the golden tickets this weekend. Obviously, there's other names like Ryan Gelfie and Chris Brown, Jim Rebenek, people like that who could absolutely, be dangerous. And like we said with the women's race, there's, I'm sure, a few people who we're not mentoring who we don't know anything about who could have a breakout True Hart Brown type race this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but I think our value maybe, Debo, is just having been around a little bit, knowing some of these men and women and adding a little bit of color to the whole thing, right?
Yeah. Well, dude, it's super fun to break it down with you. I appreciate you coming on. We'll have to make this sort of a running theme with golden ticket races. It's an absolute joy. And I have to say, this may get me canceled here. I'm going to put a controversial opinion out there. I understand that the Boston Marathon is cool. This weekend is going to be so much cooler than the Boston Marathon. We've got Madeira happening in 3 hours from now, which is going to be a sick race. We broke it down last week. So if you missed that, go back and check out our preview for Madeira 115K, and then Canyons tomorrow. This is going to be way cooler than the Boston Marathon, people. So just a couple reminders before we go. We mentioned at the top of the show, if you haven't put in your picks for Fantasy Freetrail, go to fantasy.freetrail.com. Get your picks in, go 5 deep in both races. Make sure you share them out to the community. It'll auto-populate the hashtags. Everything is going to go viral that way. And it's a fun way for us to all interact, make some picks, engage the community, learn more about the pro athletes, and then banter and make fun of each other on the back end. Harmony won our beta test at Gorge Waterfalls. Yeah, and she put her picks in this morning. So my hope is that Harmony can defend her victory from last week. But and then one other thing to maybe our Colorado viewers, I'm flying out in just a couple of hours. We're going to have an event with Athletic Brewing in Golden tomorrow night. Going to be emceeing film screening for the Journey to 100 film that they're premiering about Jason Hardrath's FKT project on the Washington Bulgers, the 100 tallest peaks in the state of Washington. So I'm going to be out doing a little live podcast and emceeing gig in Colorado tomorrow. So if you guys are in the area, come see us in Golden. Any final thoughts for us, Mr. Senseman? What do you got going this weekend? Are you going to run like 200 miles to get ready for Cocodona or what?
Well, we got 9 days till liftoff, 9 or 10. So, we're taking it a little easier, but I'm going to get some heat. I'm going to Palm Springs because it could be hot. It's a good excuse to go to Palm Springs. I got a heat train. So that's what I'm doing. So I'll get some good mountain trails in out there.
Good, mate. Well, I probably won't talk to you before liftoff for Cocodona. So on behalf of myself and all our live audience, our viewers, the Freetrail fam, good luck at Cocodona, man. I'm going to have to get my fantasy picks in for that race too, but that's going to be a vision quest, man. You're going to probably discover the meaning of life out there and get as close to spirituality as you possibly can in human form.
That's kind of the goal. So I'll need some luck. I appreciate it.
Good, mate. Well, big thanks to everybody who is watching. A big thanks to Aura, our sponsor. Go check out the link in the description if you want to grab an Aura ring. I hope you guys have a great weekend watching the action at Madeira and Canyons. I hope this was fun for you, us breaking everything down. On behalf of my good friend, Mr. Eric Senseman, my name is Dylan Bowman. Have an awesome weekend, everybody.